The room was cold, an eerie silence filling the space. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the blood-stained letter on the floor. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the events leading up to this moment. The distant sound of sirens wailed outside, growing louder as if the city itself was trying to warn her. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She couldn't remember how she had gotten here, only that she was the last person to see Jake alive. "What happened last night?" she whispered to herself, but no answer came. The letter, soaked in crimson, was the only clue. She bent down, hesitant, but something told her this would be the start of something far worse than she could have ever imagined. Sarah sat down in the chair, her hands gripping a coffee cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. The warmth of the cup did little to soothe the chill creeping through her body. She couldn't make sense of the situation. The letter, the blood, the panic. She should have been at home, safe. But now, she was tangled in something much darker. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, the Craigslist ad that led her to a strange encounter, the odd feeling of unease that followed. "I didn't ask for this," she muttered to herself, her breath catching in her throat. "I was just a bystander. But now, they think I'm hiding something." Flashbacks of her last day with Jake flickered in her mind. They had spent hours scrolling through Craigslist, laughing at the bizarre items people tried to sell. A couch listed for free caught their attention, and they joked about it being haunted. She remembered the last time she saw Jake, the way he smiled, carefree before disappearing into the night. It was just a couch, she whispered to herself, but deep down she knew that wasn't true. There was more to it. The couch, the ad, it was all connected, leading her into something she wasn't prepared for. The night Jake disappeared was a blur in Sarah's memory. She remembered walking him to the door, a promise to meet up soon. But then, nothing. He never returned. The phone calls went unanswered, the text messages left on read. Sarah's heart sank as she thought about the Craigslist ad, the one that promised a free couch. Had that been the reason Jake vanished? Her mind raced, the questions swirling in a frenzy. "What did you get yourself into, Jake?" she whispered, staring out the window into the dark night. Sarah couldn't stop herself from diving deeper into the mystery. She had to know what happened to Jake. She found herself sitting at her desk, poring over Craigslist listings, looking for any clue that might lead her to the truth. Each ad seemed normal at first glance, but there was something hidden beneath the surface, an unsettling pattern. People were vanishing, one by one, after responding to seemingly innocent ads. Sarah's stomach tightened. The clues pointed in one direction, and it wasn't good. "This is bigger than I thought," she murmured to herself. Sarah sat across from Detective Frank, her eyes fixed on his weathered face. She didn't know why she trusted him, but something in his eyes told her he knew more than he was letting on. "You're looking at this all wrong," he said, leaning forward. "There's more to these Craigslist ads than just people looking for cheap furniture. This is organized." Sarah's stomach churned as she listened. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Frank's eyes darkened, his tone serious. "These aren't random disappearances. Someone is deliberately luring people in. It's a pattern, and it's not just happening here. They're all connected, Sarah." The words echoed in her mind as she realized that Jake wasn't just another victim. He was part of something much bigger, something sinister. "You're telling me this isn't just a freak coincidence?" she asked. Frank nodded gravely. "No, it's a game." After meeting with Frank, Sarah felt more conflicted than ever. She returned to her apartment, her mind racing with the new information. What game was Frank talking about? Her eyes lingered on the Craigslist that she had printed out earlier, the one for the free couch. It had seemed innocent enough at first, an offer too good to pass up. But now, everything seemed suspicious. She pulled the laptop toward her and reread the ad. "Must pick up in person," it read. That was it. Nothing more, just a simple phrase that had now become a chilling red flag. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed in the seller's name again, hoping to uncover something she missed. But the search turned up nothing. The seller had no history, No other posts, no trace. It was as if they didn't even exist. The tension in the air thickened as Sarah decided to visit the address listed in the ad. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. Her mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. As she arrived at the address, she felt an uneasy chill run through her body. The house was old, decrepit, and tucked away on the outskirts of town, far from the bustling heart of the city. A single light flickered in one of the windows, casting an eerie glow on the front porch. Sarah's pulse quickened. She hesitated, wondering if she was walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. She had to know the truth. Slowly she stepped up to the porch, her breath shallow as she knocked on the door. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. An elderly man with a scruffy beard stood in the doorway, his eyes cold and distant. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice raspy. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She tried to sound confident, but her voice faltered. I saw your ad for the free couch." The man's gaze flickered briefly, then he stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. Reluctantly, she stepped inside, her eyes immediately drawn to the couch in the center of the room. It was worn, tattered, and stained. Something about it seemed off, but Sarah couldn't pinpoint what. The air smelled musty, thick with dust and decay. She felt trapped, but her curiosity pushed her forward. "It's right here," the man said, pointing to the couch. "You can take it if you want." Sarah swallowed hard, staring at the couch. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but it certainly wasn't this. As Sarah stood in the room, the man's cold stare bore into her, making her skin crawl. The silence between them was thick, oppressive. Then, just as she was about to leave, she noticed something strange. A note, barely visible, tucked beneath the couch cushion. She pulled it out cautiously, unfolding it with trembling hands. "You shouldn't have come here," it read in jagged handwriting. Her heart stopped. It was a warning. Suddenly, the man's voice cut through the air, low and menacing. "You should leave, now." Panic surged through Sarah as she turned to run, but her legs felt heavy, as if the house itself was trying to keep her inside. She bolted toward the door, the man's laughter echoing behind her. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The note she found had set off a chain of thoughts she couldn't control. Every moment since meeting Jake had been clouded by confusion and fear. Determined to uncover the truth, she started connecting the dots between the Craigslist ads, the mysterious disappearances, and the warnings. The more she dug, the clearer it became that these weren't random acts. They were orchestrated by someone. Sarah found herself at the library, scouring old news reports, trying to find a link to a previous case that might connect to the current string of disappearances. Hours passed as she read about similar cases across the country, all with the same pattern: people vanishing after responding to online ads. But there was one name that kept resurfacing, someone called the Collector. The thought chilled her to the core. Was this the person behind Jake's disappearance? The more Sarah learned about the Collector, the more her anxiety grew. The name wasn't just an alias, it was a label given to a person whose pattern of killings had spanned over several years. The Collector lured victims through Craigslist ads, offering seemingly harmless items, like couches and furniture, but his true motive was far darker. Each victim was taken after responding to one of his ads, their fates unknown. There were whispers that the Collector had been operating for years, carefully selecting his prey. And now, Sarah realized, Jake had become part of this twisted game. The truth was staring her in the face, but she couldn't figure out why she hadn't seen it sooner. Her thoughts raced. Was she in danger? Had she been targeted? She knew she had to get out of town before it was too late, but something kept her glued to this search. She had to find out who the Collector was, no matter the cost. Sarah's obsession with the case deepened. She couldn't stop herself. The Collector had left a trail of broken lives, and she was determined to find out why. As she pieced together the clues, Sarah realized that the Collector was not just killing people. He was orchestrating a twisted game, a sickening contest in which the winners were those who managed to survive. The only thing keeping Sarah going was the hope that Jake was still alive, somewhere, hiding in plain sight. Every ad she scrolled through, every thread she followed, seemed to lead nowhere, until she stumbled upon a new listing. It was from the same anonymous user, but this time, it wasn't for a couch. It was for a locked chest, offered for free. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Was this another trap? Or was it a chance to finally find Jake? Driven by desperation, Sarah knew she had to see the chest for herself. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to know if it was another one of the collector's twisted traps, or if it was the key to finding Jake. The address listed for the chest was in an industrial area, far from the city's heart. Sarah's nerves were on edge as she parked her car, the buildings around her dark and abandoned, casting long shadows. She hesitated at the entrance of a rundown warehouse, the only sound being the echo of her footsteps against the concrete. The chest was supposed to be inside, but there was no sign of it anywhere. She felt a pang of fear, but the thought of Jake kept her moving forward. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. Someone was there watching her. Before she could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was a man, tall and intimidating, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. The man's presence was magnetic, and his words carried a sinister undertone. "I know what you're looking for," he continued, taking a slow step toward her. "But you won't find it here." Fear gripped Sarah's chest, but she stood her ground, trying to mask her terror. "Where's Jake?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The man smiled, but there was nothing kind in his expression. "You're getting closer," he said cryptically. "But you're not ready yet." And with that, he turned and vanished into the dark, leaving Sarah standing there, more confused and scared than ever. Sarah's heart raced as she looked around the dark, cold room. She could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above, but there was no other sound. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse hammering in her ears. The walls felt like they were closing in on her as she realized that she was alone. But she wasn't. The figure from the warehouse, the man in the hoodie, was watching her from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in a gravelly voice that sent a chill down her spine. Sarah felt a jolt of panic. She had to get out of there, but every step felt like it was leading her deeper into the trap. "Where's Jake?" she demanded again, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes glowing in the dim light. "You're not ready for the truth," he replied, his tone almost sympathetic. "But you will be soon enough." The man's words echoed in Sarah's mind as she stood there, paralyzed by fear. She had to act. She couldn't let this man get the best of her. "Tell me what you know about Jake," she shouted, her voice more forceful than she felt. But the man remained silent, only taking another step toward her. His face remained hidden in shadow, his presence overwhelming. "He's not the one you should be worried about," he said, his voice low and cold. The words sent a wave of confusion through Sarah. What did he mean? Was Jake still alive? "Please," Sarah whispered, desperation creeping into her voice. "I need to know." But before the man could respond, a loud crash sounded from behind them. The door to the room slammed open, and Sarah turned in surprise. Someone was there, someone she didn't expect. The figure that emerged from the doorway was familiar, Detective Frank. His face was tense, and there was something about his posture that made Sarah's heart sink. "Sarah, get away from him," Frank ordered, his voice sharp. Sarah didn't understand. Was Frank in on this too? Was he working with the man in the hoodie? Her mind spun as she tried to process the situation. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Frank continued, his voice low. The man in the hoodie chuckled darkly, as if the whole thing were some twisted game. "You're too late, Frank," the man said with a cruel smile. "She's already figured it out. She's part of it now." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What was he talking about? What did he mean? Frank stepped further into the room, his eyes flickering between Sarah and the man in the hoodie. "You don't know how deep this goes, Sarah," he said softly, his expression torn. "This isn't just about Jake. This goes much higher, much darker." Sarah couldn't process the information. "What do you mean? What is this?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. Frank's jaw tightened. "The collector has been operating for years. He doesn't just take people for fun. He's been using them for a sick game, a game where the players don't even know they're involved." Sarah stared at Frank, unable to comprehend the magnitude of his words. Was she a part of this twisted game all along? "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. Frank's face hardened. "Because I didn't want you to get involved. But it's too late now." The room seemed to close in on Sarah as she tried to process everything that had happened. The collector. Dot. The game. Jake. Dot. Frank. Daiwi. It was too much to take in. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she looked at Frank, then the man in the hoodie. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Frank's expression softened, just for a moment. "Now we find Jake. We end this." He turned to the man in the hoodie. "And you're not going to stop us." The man's smile grew wider, more sinister. "I'm not stopping you. I'm just watching." He stepped back into the shadows, vanishing like a phantom. Sarah felt a surge of determination flood her. She wasn't going to let this end like this. She was going to find Jake. She was going to end this twisted game once and for all. The night had swallowed the city whole, and as Sarah and Frank walked deeper into the heart of the industrial district, the air grew heavier. Every step they took echoed, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "He's close," Frank muttered, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. They were getting closer to the truth, but with each step, the danger felt more real. The collector had been playing his sick game for years, and now it was time to end it. The dim streetlights flickered, casting brief shadows across the cracked pavement. Sarah's mind raced. What would they find inside the next warehouse? Was Jake still alive, or had he already fallen victim to this twisted manhunt? They rounded the corner and stopped in front of a massive steel door, cold and imposing. Frank nodded toward it. "This is it. He's in there." The door creaked open, and they stepped inside. The vast empty space felt like a graveyard, the walls adorned with strange markings that made Sarah's skin crawl. There was an oppressive silence, broken only by their footsteps. "Keep your eyes open," Frank warned in a low voice. "He's not alone." The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The collector had been gathering people, victims, participants in his sick game. What had he done to them? What was left of Jake? The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the warehouse, the sound of distant movement echoing from somewhere ahead. Sarah's breath hitched. "This doesn't feel right," she whispered, but Frank was already moving forward, leading the way. The deeper they went, the more she felt like they were walking into a trap. They stopped suddenly, hearing a low, menacing laugh echoing through the empty space. Sarah froze, her heart stopping for a beat. The collector's voice, deep and taunting, floated out from the shadows. "You really think you can stop me?" he called. Frank's hand instinctively reached for his weapon, but Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "Where is he?" she demanded, her gaze locked on the shadows. The laugh grew louder, then the figure emerged. The man in the hoodie, his face obscured as always, stepped into the dim light, his smile twisted in amusement. "You're closer than ever, but you're not ready for what comes next," he said with a sinister gleam in his eyes. "This game is far from over." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as the collector stepped closer, his movements deliberate and slow. He raised his hand, revealing a small blood-stained object in his grip. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized it, Jake's phone. The collector's smile widened as he dangled it between them. The screen cracked and smeared with blood. "You think you're the hero in this story," he taunted. "You're just another player, just like him." Frank stepped forward, his gun aimed at the figure, but the collector only laughed again, a cold, hollow sound. Go ahead. Shoot. It won't change anything. You're all just part of the game. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away from the phone, a wave of nausea hitting her as she realized just how much she had underestimated the true darkness of this man. The tension in the air was palpable. Sarah could feel the weight of the decision before her. Confront the collector now, or risk losing Jake forever. She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the blood-stained phone. Tell me where he is, Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with desperation. The collector's smile twisted further, his eyes gleaming with amusement. You're so close, Sarah. So close to the truth. But it's not enough. Not yet. Before she could react, the man in the hoodie turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving Sarah and Frank standing in stunned silence. They had no choice but to follow. The game was far from over, and the only way to end it was to catch him. The chase was on. Sarah and Frank pushed through the dark hallway, their footsteps echoing as they followed the faint sound of the collector's voice. It wasn't just an eerie whisper, it was a sick, mocking tone that seemed to wrap itself around them like a trap. You think you're close. You're still so far away, he said, his voice echoing from somewhere deep within the warehouse. Every step Sarah took felt heavier, the air growing colder, more suffocating. Frank's grip on his gun tightened, but his face was clouded with uncertainty. They had come so far, but the end still felt distant. We have to find him now, Sarah muttered. I can't keep doing this. Jake, he's in there, I know it. Her mind raced. Every turn felt like they were walking deeper into hell. The sounds grew louder, and then, just as she felt her resolve falter, a door ahead creaked open. The door creaked open, revealing a large, dimly lit room, cluttered with broken furniture and remnants of long-forgotten objects. It smelled of decay. In the center of the room, standing before a wall of monitors, was the collector. He was watching them, his face unreadable behind the shadows of his hood. Welcome to the game's final round, he said, his voice dripping with anticipation. It's the moment of truth, Sarah. The final choice. Sarah's stomach churned. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice hoarse. The collector slowly turned to face her, his smile widening. You'll see soon enough, but first you need to choose. Will you save Jake, or will you let the game end? Sarah's mind reeled. He was toying with her, dragging her to the brink of madness. She couldn't allow herself to falter now, but every instinct told her she was in far deeper than she ever imagined. Sarah took a step forward, her heart hammering in her chest. What do you want from us? She asked, her voice steady but filled with desperation. The collector's smile twisted as he turned to the monitors, clicking a button that flickered images of Jake, bound to a chair in a dark room. I want you to choose, Sarah. You'll either save him or leave him behind. It's all part of the game. Sarah's throat tightened. What have you done to him? She whispered. He's still alive, but not for long, the collector replied coldly. He stepped closer to Sarah, his eyes gleaming. But you know the rules, don't you? A choice must be made. The game only ends when you decide. Frank moved closer to Sarah, his voice low and urgent. Don't listen to him. We'll get Jake, together. But Sarah's eyes were locked on the screen, her entire world narrowing to one horrifying truth. She had to make a choice, and time was running out. The collector's laughter echoed through the room, sending a chill down Sarah's spine. You've reached the end of the game, Sarah, he taunted, watching her every move. But there's no easy way out. There's always a price. Frank's grip tightened on his gun. We're not playing your game, he spat, his voice filled with disgust. But Sarah knew, deep down, there was no escaping it. The collector had already set everything in motion. This was no longer a game. It was a countdown. She had to decide. You're a monster, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. The collector stepped back, nodding. Perhaps, but I am the only way you'll ever find the truth. The room grew colder, as if the very walls were closing in. There was no turning back. Sarah had already crossed the line. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Save Jake, or let the game claim another victim. Sarah's heart raced as she finally made her choice. She couldn't leave Jake to die, not after everything. She turned to Frank. "We save him," she said, her voice firm. Frank nodded, his hand reaching for his gun. "Let's end this." They stormed forward, the weight of the moment heavy on their shoulders. The collector stepped aside, watching them with amusement. "You think you can stop me? The game is already over." But Sarah was done playing. They had come this far, and nothing, not even the collector, was going to stop them from saving Jake. They burst through the next door, the final confrontation awaiting them. This was it, the moment they'd been fighting for. The truth was just within reach. The game was ending now, one way or another. The door slammed open, and Sarah and Frank rushed inside, guns drawn. The room was a twisted reflection of everything Sarah had feared. Jake sat in the center, bound to a chair, his face pale and bloody. The collector stood in the corner, observing them with a detached, almost bored expression. "You came for him," the collector said, his voice oozing with contempt. "But you've already lost." Frank's eyes darted around the room, scanning for traps, for danger. But Sarah's focus was solely on Jake. She ran to him, hands shaking as she cut through the ropes. "Jake, you're alive," she whispered, her voice thick with relief and disbelief. But Jake's eyes didn't meet hers. They were empty, glazed over, as if he wasn't really there. "No," Sarah breathed. "What have you done to him?" The collector's smile widened. "He was never a victim, Sarah. He was always a player." Sarah's heart pounded as she turned to face the collector, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" she demanded. The collector stepped forward, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "You've been chasing a lie," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Jake wasn't just another victim. He's been playing this game for years just like you will, once I'm finished with you." Sarah's world spun. "No," she whispered. "Jake would never." "Oh, he did," the collector interrupted, his voice almost tender. "He volunteered. He wanted to be part of something bigger, and now he's part of this game." Jake's vacant eyes met hers, and for the first time Sarah saw the truth. Jake had been a player in the collector's sick game all along. Sarah stumbled back, the betrayal ripping through her. "Why didn't you tell me, Jake?" she choked out. The weight of the truth crashed down on Sarah like a tidal wave. What? Jake, the person she thought she knew, had been part of this all along. The collector's words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't stop herself from looking at him. "What kind of game is this?" she demanded. The collector smiled. "A game of survival," he said, his eyes gleaming with delight. "Every participant must decide what they're willing to sacrifice to win. Jake chose to play, and now you're the last one standing. But don't worry, Sarah, you'll have your turn soon enough." Sarah's legs felt weak. She couldn't understand it. Why hadn't she seen it? Jake had been a pawn in the collector's game from the beginning. "You're not going to get away with this," Sarah said, her voice shaking but filled with determination. The collector's smile faded. "Oh, but I already have." The room seemed to close in on them, the walls pressing in with the weight of the final moments. Sarah's pulse raced as she realized there was only one choice left: end it all. The collector had toyed with her, manipulated her, and used her. But she wasn't going to let him win. She reached for the gun at her side, her hand steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. "I'm ending this," she said, her voice unwavering. Frank moved to her side, his hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together, Sarah," he said, his voice low and resolute. The collector looked at them, his face expressionless. "You think you can stop me?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "It's too late." Sarah didn't hesitate. She aimed the gun at the collector, the weight of the decision heavy in her hand. "No, it's not," she said, her finger tightening on the trigger. The sound of the gunshot rang out, echoing through the room, but as Sarah's hand lowered, she realized the truth. It wasn't the collector who fell. Jake, his eyes suddenly clear, stood in front of her, blood staining his shirt. He had taken the shot for the collector. "Jake, no!" Sarah screamed, rushing to him. He smiled weakly, his voice a rasp. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I never wanted you to know, but I couldn't let you win." As Sarah held Jake in her arms, the collector's laugh filled the room. "Game over," he said, his voice fading into the darkness. Sarah's world shattered as she realized that no one was ever meant to win this game, only survive it. And now, with Jake slipping away, she had lost everything.